7 days before my son's wedding, his fiancée whispered to me, "Your disappearance would be the best gift." So I disappeared. I sold our house, canceled all trace of myself, and vanished. What they found in the empty house destroyed them forever. The silence in my empty house has a distinct quality. It's not the peaceful silence of dawn, nor the complicit silence of quiet reading. It's a heavy, absolute silence, a sonic void that seems to absorb even the last echo of my life, a silence that screams my own absence. I run my fingertips along the doorframe of what has been, for 43 years, my home. The wood, old and noble, is smooth at that precise point, from the touch of countless hands over the decades. My hand stops at a small notch, barely perceptible. Lucas, my son, made it with a toy truck on his 6th birthday. He cried in fear that I would scold him. I instead just smiled and told him, "It's just wood, darling. The house is alive because we are in it. These are just its scars, its history. Now the house is dead, and my story, the one I wrote with laughter, tears and shared whispers, is about to close forever." I sigh, and the sound gets lost in the naked immensity of the living room. My feet, wrapped in old house slippers that I'll take with me like a treasure, creak slightly on the dust that's already settling on the parquet. Each room, each corner, is a stab of memory. There, next to the window overlooking the garden, is the tea stain that Manuel, my husband, spilled the winter before cancer took him away. He apologized 1,000 times, but I liked it. It was his, an imperfect and perfect reminder of his presence. Now someone will sand it and varnish it, erasing his last physical trace. I adjust the sweater over my shoulders, feeling the cold that seeps through the naked windows, no longer with curtains to mitigate it. The echo of my steps follows me like a faithful ghost. 1 week, I think, and my heart shrinks like a fist. Only 1 week has passed since that day, since those words, and yet I feel as if decades had passed, as if the woman who heard that phrase wasn't me, but a previous version, more naive, who still believed that love smoothed everything. My memory, treacherous and vivid, transports me back. It had been any Sunday, or so it seemed. The afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like atoms of joy. It smelled of cinnamon and apple. I was baking Sophia's favorite cake. My daughter, Daniel, my son-in-law, was looking at her with that calm smile that had always seemed like a balm to my girl's fiery character. He rocked his chair back, hands clasped over his abdomen. "Smells like heaven, Clara," he said, and his voice was warm, like the aroma that filled the house. "It's Sophia's reconciliation cake," I replied, drying my hands on my apron. "She had a tough week at work. I think this will cheer her up." Daniel nodded with an understanding smile. He was always that easy with me. Never a reproach, never an uncomfortable look. That's why I loved him from the first day Sophia brought him home. A shy boy with big hands and eyes full of admiration for my daughter. The front door opened and closed with a sharp bang. A pair of high heels clicked decisively on the entrance hall floor. They weren't Sophia's happy steps. They were harder, more urgent. "Mom? Daniel? Are you in the kitchen?" It was Valeria's voice. My daughter-in-law, my son Lucas's fiancée. The sound of her voice was usually melodious, but that day it had a metallic edge, a tension that made me shiver unconsciously. Daniel whispered a smile and got up to meet her, but she was already appearing in the doorway. She came impeccable, as always. A cream-colored pantsuit that cost more than my living room furniture, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun that didn't allow a single hair out of place. But her usual elegance was fractured by something. Her eyes, normally serene, shone with a strange light. She carried a leather folder under her arm, gripping it like a shield. "Hello, darling," I greeted her, forcing a warmth I suddenly didn't feel. "Would you like some cake? It's freshly made." She completely ignored my offer. her gaze fixed on Daniel. And then on me. She breathed deeply, as if gathering courage for something. "Daniel, honey, could you leave us alone for a moment?" she asked, but it sounded like an order. Her tone was so icy that I saw Daniel's face cloud with confusion. "Is everything okay, Val?" he asked, his voice laden with concern. "Everything is perfect. I just need to talk to Clara. In private." The word Clara in her mouth, instead of mother-in-law, or simply Mom, as she used to call me, fell like a slab of ice in my stomach. Daniel looked at me, seeking guidance. I nodded slightly, with a tense smile that didn't reach my eyes. He hesitated for an instant, but then nodded and left the kitchen, throwing me one last look of concern before disappearing. The sound of his steps walking away seemed to take all the warmth from the room. I was left alone with Valeria, surrounded by the sweet aroma of a cake that suddenly seemed nauseating. I leaned against the edge of the counter, feeling the cold marble through the fabric of my skirt. "What's wrong, Valeria?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange, small. "You seem upset." She didn't move. She remained on the threshold, as if refusing to fully enter my space. She opened the folder and took out some sheets of paper. She placed them on the kitchen table, on the scratched wood where my children had done their homework, where Manuel and I had breakfast for 30 years. "I've been reviewing the wedding details," she said, and her voice was flat, professional, as if she were in a business meeting. "The cash flows, the suppliers, the logistics." "I see," I said, confused. "I know it's been an enormous stress, but everything seems to be going smoothly, right? The country club garden will be beautiful." "The garden is just the stage, Clara," she snapped, and her gaze turned toward me, sharp. "The problem is the script, and you are a character that doesn't fit." The air got stuck in my lungs. I blinked. Sure, I had misunderstood. "Excuse me, what do you mean?" "I mean that your presence complicates things." She slid one of the sheets toward me. It was an organizational chart of the ceremony. My name was underlined in red, in several places: accompaniment to the altar, groom's mother's toast, dance with the groom. "Look at this. Too many spotlights on you, on your side of the family." "It's your son's wedding," I replied, and I noticed how a subtle tremor began in my hands. I hid them behind my apron. "And I'm his mother. It's normal." "It's not normal." Her voice broke for the first time, loaded with a frustration that seemed to boil under the surface. "Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't see how Lucas gets nervous every time you talk about your dead husband? Do you think I don't notice the sorrow in your eyes every time you mention how much Manuel would have liked to be here? That shadow envelops everything, Clara." I was paralyzed. Each word was an ice needle piercing my skin. Lucas, nervous because of me, my sorrow, it was my life. It was my truth. "Valeria, I don't understand," I stammered. "I'm just trying. It's an important day for everyone. For the family." "Exactly." She cut me off, pointing at the paper with an impeccably manicured finger. "For my family. For Lucas and me. For my parents. This wedding must be perfect. A celebration of the future, not a monument to the past." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to find air, trying to find calm. It couldn't be real. I was dreaming. This was a nightmare. "And what do you suggest?" I asked, and my voice was barely a hoarse whisper. "That I don't give the toast? That I don't dance with my son?" She breathed deeply, straightened her shoulders. I knew, in that instant, that what was coming next, she had rehearsed. She had meditated on it. This wasn't a fit of rage. It was an execution. "I suggest you understand that you have to give up the spotlight, that this day is not about you." She made a dramatic pause, her eyes scrutinizing my face, looking for the effect of her words. "My parents are making an enormous financial effort. My mother, well, she has a very clear vision of how things should be, a vision of elegance and lightness. Your constant emotional weight is like a gray cloud over everything. I felt the world tilt under my feet. I gripped the marble counter tightly. The tips of my fingers were white. My emotional weight, I repeated, unable to believe it. Yes, she affirmed, with a coldness that left me breathless. Your sadness, your constant references to Manuel, your way of being. So quiet, so old-fashioned. You don't fit the image. Tears began to blur my vision. I held them back with difficulty. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I wouldn't give her the spectacle of my pain. Valeria, I said, struggling to maintain composure. I've tried to be useful to you. I've helped with everything I could. I've respected each of your decisions. I've loved my son and accepted you as his choice. This is gratitude. That word gratitude seemed to activate something in her. Her expression hardened even more, if possible. Gratitude is not what's needed here. What's needed is pragmatism and common sense. She advanced a step toward me. Her perfume, expensive and complex, enveloped me, suffocating. My parents and I have talked, and we agree. On what? I asked, although a part of me, a part that was already bleeding inside, already knew. She exhaled, and for a second, a fraction of a second, I saw something like doubt in her eyes, but it was quickly crushed by fierce determination. The best gift you could give us, she said, and each word fell like a drop of acid. The perfect gift for our new life together would be for you to step aside, give us space. My heart was beating so hard I could feel the echo in my ears. The buzzing was deafening. Space? I asked, stunned. Yes. She nodded slowly. For you to disappear a little from our family, from our life. At least from the facade, from public appearances, from key moments. For everyone's good, for Lucas's good, so he can be happy, without burdens. For you to disappear. The words floated in the air between us. Grotesque, inhuman. I looked at them, searching for a hint of joke, of exaggeration, of something that wasn't this absolute cruelty, but there was nothing, only the cold certainty of her blue eyes. Are you telling me that you don't want me at my own son's wedding? The question came from my lips in shreds. I'm saying that your presence as it is a problem, she corrected, with the precision of a surgeon cutting healthy tissue. Maybe, in the future, when things are more settled, when Lucas and I couldn't listen anymore. A hoarse sound escaped from my throat. I brought my hand to my mouth. The pain was physical, a tear in my chest, a stab in the soul. Everything I had fought for, everything I had loved, everything I was reduced to a problem, to a burden. Valeria observed me. There was no remorse in her gaze, only a cold assessment, as if I were a piece of furniture that didn't match the decoration and had to be taken to the storage room. Think about it, she finally said, collecting her papers with precise movements. It's for everyone's good, especially for Lucas's. You wouldn't want to embitter the most important day of his life, would you? And with that, she turned around. Her heels clicked again on the floor, walking away. I heard her say something to Daniel in the entrance hall, with a voice that had recovered all its artificial sweetness. Then, the front door opened and closed. I was left alone in the middle of my kitchen, surrounded by the sweet aroma of a cake that no one would eat, with my heart shattered in my chest. I slid down the counter to the floor, knees bent against my chest. The cold of the tile soaked through my clothes, and then for the first time since Manuel died, I abandoned myself completely to silent and desperate crying, a crying that wasn't just for the monstrosity of what had just happened, but for the terrifying certainty that deep down, She was right about one thing: my son, my Lucas, hadn't been there to defend me. He hadn't come out from behind the door to yell at his fiancée to shut up. He had remained silent, and his silence was the deepest betrayal, the wound that would never heal. The sound of a moving truck passing down the street brings me back to the present, to the empty house. I dry a solitary tear that has managed to escape and traces a dusty path down my cheek. 1 week, 7 days since that instant that split my life into a before and after. I didn't think about it. There was no rage, no screaming, no dramatic confrontations, only a terrible glacial peace. The peace that comes when you have nothing left to lose. I hung the apron on its hook for the last time. I went up the stairs, my steps echoing on the wood, and sat on the edge of my bed, the same one I had shared with Manuel, and I made the most difficult and most liberating decision of my life. If my presence was a hindrance, I would leave. Not just from the wedding, from everything. The next day, I called a real estate agency, put the house up for sale, urgent price, everything included. I hung up before they could ask many questions. Then I picked up the phone again and dialed Lucas's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice full of that nervous energy he always had when talking about the wedding. "Mom. Hi. I was just going to call you. Valeria and I are..." "Lucas," I interrupted him, and my voice sounded serene, flat, like a frozen lake. "Don't come." "Excuse me? What's wrong? Are you okay?" His tone changed immediately, tinged with concern. "I'm perfectly fine." I breathed deeply. "I've decided it's better this way. For everyone." "Better what, Mom?" "I don't understand." "I've sold the house," I said, and the words came out clean, cutting. "I'm leaving. Today." There was absolute silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the hum of his confusion. What are you saying?" His voice was now a thread of incredulity. "Sold the house? You're leaving? Where? Mom? This makes no sense. The wedding is in a week." "No," I whispered, and for the first time, a drop of emotion cracked my voice. "There's no wedding. Not for me." "Mom, for God's sake." "What's wrong with you? Is this about yesterday? Valeria told me you had a small argument, that you were a bit sensitive." A small argument. Sensitive. The world kept turning, but I was no longer in it. No longer. "Goodbye, Lucas," I said, with infinite tenderness and pain that consumed me inside. "Be happy." "Mom, wait. Don't hang up." "Clara." I hung up, and then I unplugged the landline. I turned off my mobile phone. I left it on the nightstand, next to the wedding photo of Manuel and me. I dressed in simple clothes. I packed a small suitcase with the essentials: some photos, Manuel's old sweater, the love letters he wrote me, the macaroni bracelets my children made for me when they were little. The rest no longer mattered to me. The next 48 hours were a silent whirlwind. I signed the sale papers with a trembling but firm hand. The real estate agency took care of everything. Total liquidation, I told them. Everything must disappear. They looked at me with pity, believing I was a widow, pressed for money. They nodded with condescending compassion. I didn't look back when I left for the last time. I didn't touch the doorbell. I got into a taxi that was waiting for me at the corner and gave it the address of a small boarding house on the other side of the city, a place where no one would find me. From my anonymous room, with the blinds half closed, I imagined the chaos. Lucas's desperate calls to a phone that would never answer, Sophia's bewilderment, Valeria's cold anger at seeing her problem solved in the most radical and unexpected way possible. And now, I've returned. One last time. The new owner, a young woman with kind eyes, gave me permission to collect some last personal things that I told her I had forgotten in the storage room. She handed me the keys with a smile. Take your time. I walk through the empty house. My steps echo in the living room, in the dining room, in the bedrooms. There's no furniture anymore, only shadows of where they were. Lighter marks on the wall where the pictures hung, small holes where we nailed the shelves. The knot in my throat is so big, I can barely breathe. I stop in front of the storage room door, under the stairs that lead upstairs. This is indeed my last scar, the last wound to close. I insert the key in the lock, which creaks with resistance. I push the wooden door, which opens with a long and painful moan. The air that comes out is dense, loaded with dust and years. The storage room is small, cluttered with boxes that the moving company didn't take, because they contained things without value. Boxes full of the life I decided to leave behind. But I haven't come for them. I kneel on the dusty floor, in front of the back wall. My fingertips search among the wooden boards until they find the one I know is slightly loose, the one Manuel and I chose so long ago. The pressure of my nails makes it give way with a muffled click. I move it aside. Behind it, hidden in a gap between the beams, there's an old metal box, rusted at the corners. I take it out carefully. It's cold to the touch, heavy, not because of what it physically contains, but because of the weight of years of secrets, of promises. I sit on the floor, cross-legged, the box on my lap. The lid is sealed with yellowed adhesive tape. With a trembling finger, I break it. The sound of the paper tearing is obscenely loud in the silence. Inside, there are no jewels, no money, no important documents. There are photos, dozens of photos, of Manuel and me, young, smiling, with the world at our feet, of Lucas and Sophia as babies, with cheeks covered in apple puree, children's drawings, clumsy and full of color, my two children's ultrasounds, with those blurry spots that were the entire universe, Lucas's first tie, Sophia's secret diary from when she was 13, with a tiny padlock that I always knew how to open because the password was my name. And on top of everything, a letter, on the paper, already yellowed, Manuel's handwriting, firm and dear. For my Clara, in case one day the world turns cold and you forget how warm our love made everything. A sob breaks my chest. I let it out. There's no need to hide anymore. I open the letter. I haven't read it since the day I hid it here, after his funeral, when the pain was so immense that I needed to keep his voice in a safe place, away from my daily grief. I read his words. Words of love, of future, of the family we built, of the strength he saw in my eyes, of the life that he swore we would live forever. And then in the last paragraph, my eyes stop. The blood seems to freeze in my veins. My heart stops dead. No, it can't be. I read again. And again. The words don't change. They're there, written in his own handwriting, as clear as the day he put them on paper. All the air leaves my lungs. The world is reduced to this piece of paper, to this impossible, monstrous revelation that tears apart the only truth on which I've based my existence for the last 20 years. The letter falls from my lifeless hands. My empty gaze fixes on the dusty wall in front of me, but I see nothing, only the echo of those words, reverberating in my destroyed soul. Manuel didn't die of cancer, and I am not who I thought I was. The last and only pillar I had left has shattered, and here on the dusty floor of the empty house that was never again a home, I remain completely alone with the silence and the unbearable weight of a truth that could have destroyed my family long before Valeria pronounced her sentence. The letter trembled in my hands, or rather it was my hands that trembled with uncontrollable violence, making the paper dance and the words, his words, become blurry, a stain of ink on the yellowed paper. The air suddenly thickened, heavy as lead, and each breath was a battle, a titanic effort for a little oxygen to reach lungs that refused to function. He didn't die of cancer. The 5 words spun in my head like blades, destroying every memory, every regret, every sleepless night, crying for his loss. 20 years. 20 years of pain, of emptiness, of wondering why him, why us, why the world was so cruel. 20 years building an altar to his memory, venerating the good man that disease had taken too soon. Everything a lie. Manuel's voice, his firm and serene handwriting, hit me from the past with the force of a tsunami. And when you read this, maybe I won't be here anymore. The doctor gave his diagnosis 6 months ago, a year of life, with luck, an aggressive, unstoppable cancer, or so everyone thinks. But there's a truth, my love, a truth I've kept to protect you, Lucas, Sophia, a truth that if it comes to light, would destroy everything. I've chosen this. I've chosen to leave this way, with this label of illness, so that our family name, our children's future, won't be stained with the darkness of my acts. Don't remember me with sorrow. Remember me as the man who gave everything, even his honor, to keep you safe. Forgive me for this last lie. It's the greatest act of love I could offer you. A guttural, animal sound escaped from my throat. It was the sound of the world tearing apart. I bent at the waist, my forehead touching the cold dirt floor of the storage room. The letter crumpled against my chest. I wasn't crying. The shock was too big, too deep, to allow something as simple as tears. It was an absolute void, a detachment from everything I was. Manuel. My Manuel. The man I thought I knew better than myself. The man with the easy smile, the always warm hand, the sense of humor that lit up rooms. Dark acts, dishonor, a lie woven for months, nothing fit, nothing made sense. The image I had of him, the cornerstone of my existence, was shattering and letting me fall into a bottomless abyss. What had he done? What secret so terrible did he carry on his shoulders to prefer that his family mourn him as a sick man, and not as what he really was? A coward? A criminal? Doubt bit me savagely. No, it couldn't be. Not my Manuel. There was an explanation. There had to be. With trembling hands, almost blinded by the whirlwind of emotions, I rummaged through the metal box. Maybe there was more. Another letter. An explanation. Something. My fingers found, under the photos and drawings, a smaller, thicker envelope. I took it out. It had no name, only a date, written in Manuel's same handwriting, the date of his death. With my heart beating in my throat, I opened it. Inside wasn't a letter. There was a bundle of newspaper clippings, carefully folded, and a small metal key, with a plastic tag, with a number written by hand, 217. The first page of the oldest clipping was yellowed, dated barely a month before Manuel got sick. The headline hit my sight with the force of a punch. Suspicious bankruptcy of Asturias Investments. Hundreds of savers affected. The prosecutor's office investigates possible millionaire scam. Below, a photo of an office building that seemed vaguely familiar. And then, in a smaller box, a list of the main executives under investigation. And there, in third place, was his name. Manuel Hidalgo, Investment Director. I read the article with sickly voracity, my eyes scanning every line, every word. It spoke of promises of high returns, of fund diversion, of accounts in tax havens, of people who had lost their life savings, their pensions, their future, ruined companies, destroyed families, suicides. One of them mentioned a man, father of a family, who had thrown himself into the void from his penthouse, unable to face the debts. The floor moved under me. A cold sweat soaked my back. Manuel, my Manuel, his name associated with that, with so much pain caused. Nausea churned my stomach. I set the clipping aside, my fingers stained with dust and newspaper ink. The next clipping was a smaller note. From a week later. Ex-director of Asturias Investments, Manuel Hidalgo, disappears without a trace. Close sources claim he would have fled the country with stolen funds. And then the last one. An obituary. Brief, discreet. Death. Manuel Hidalgo, after a long and brave fight against an illness, in the intimacy of his home, surrounded by his family, published 2 days after his death. His supposed death, because now everything was a supposition, a castle of lies. I understood then the choice. His cancer had been the perfect smokescreen, a way to disappear without justice pursuing him, without those affected by the scam clamoring for his head, a way to die with dignity in the eyes of the world and his family. Instead of rotting in a jail or living as a fugitive, he had used us. He had used me, our children, as an alibi for his escape. Our pain, our grief, had been the curtain that hid his shame. A cold black anger began to replace the initial void, an anger that burned me inside, that dried my tears before they could fall. He had chosen this. He had preferred that I carry the weight of a lonely widowhood, that my children grow up without their father, to facing the consequences of his acts. He had condemned us to a 20-year lie. He had turned our love, our life together, into a farce. And I had mourned him, I had idealized him, I had defended his memory tooth and nail. I had built my life around his absence, using his memory as a bastion against the loneliness and cold of the world, and everything was false, everything was rotten. The key. I took it. Number 217. What was it for? A station locker? An apartment? A warehouse? Was that where he had hidden the money? The loot from his scam? Was Manuel alive somewhere, living under another name, enjoying wealth stained with blood and others' tears, while I managed with the meager widow's pension and sold my house not to be a burden? Laughter burst from my lips, bitter, deranged laughter that echoed in the empty storage room and sounded foreign to me, like from another person. What brutal irony! Valeria had accused me of living in the past, of being a burden, a ghost anchored to a shadow, and she was right. But the shadow wasn't that of an honorable man, but of a coward, a scammer. I had dedicated my mourning to an illusion. I got up from the floor, my legs weak as jelly. I leaned a hand on the cold wall to keep from falling. The letter and the clippings crumpled. I put in my coat pocket. I closed the key tightly in my fist, until the metal dug into my palm. The physical pain, sharp and clear, was an anchor in the sea of confusion and rage that was drowning me. I left the storage room, closed the door with a sharp bang that sounded like a period. I no longer looked at the house with nostalgia, with pain. I looked at it with a new and terrible understanding. These walls had witnessed the lie. This kitchen had been the stage where Manuel, with his calm smile, had planned his disappearance while I served him his coffee. This living room, where we had laughed and loved, had been the set of a monumental farce. I walked toward the front door, my steps now firm, determined. The pain from Valeria's betrayal and Lucas's passivity paled to almost disappearing before the magnitude of this new wound. They were children playing at being cruel compared to Manuel's master betrayal. I opened the door, and the cold light of the winter afternoon hit me full in the face. I breathed deeply. The air no longer smelled of the past. It smelled of something harsh, unknown, of future. Just then, a car braked abruptly in front of the house, with the tires screeching against the asphalt. The door opened with a bang, and Lucas got out. He was disheveled, with messy hair, bloodshot eyes, and clothes that seemed not to have been changed in days. He looked at me, and in his face I saw a mixture of horror, incredulity, and a fury I had never seen in him before. "Mother!" he shouted, and his voice was broken, torn by emotion. Where the hell have you been? We've been going crazy for a week. The wedding is canceled. Valeria, godmother, how could you do this? He advanced toward me through the garden, but stopped short when he saw my face. I must have had an expression he didn't recognize. That wasn't that of his grieving and vulnerable mother. I must have had dry eyes, and a gaze hard as flint. Lucas, I said, and my voice sounded calm, but with a glacial coldness that made him blink. We need to talk. Talk? Talk? He exploded with desperate laughter. Now you want to talk? You've sold the house. You've disappeared. You've destroyed everything. Valeria has left me. You know, she's left me. She says my family is a factory of crazy people, that it's impossible, and you simply, here, as if nothing. Valeria was right about something, I said, cutting, interrupting his diatribe. My words left him speechless. I was a burden. I was anchored to a lie, to a big fucking lie. He looked at me, confused, anger giving way to bewilderment. What are you talking about? I took the bundle of crumpled newspaper clippings from my pocket. I handed them to him. He took them with distrust, his eyes lowering to scan the headlines. I saw how the color drained from his face, how his eyes opened like saucers, how his lips began to tremble. What is this? He murmured, but he was already seeing it, already understanding it. Your father, I said, and each word was a nail in the coffin of the memory I had of him. Didn't die of cancer, Lucas. He fled. He lied to all of us. He used us. Lucas shook his head, slowly at first, then more forcefully, as if he could push away the words with the movement. No, it's not possible. These are old slanders. It was already known that the company had problems, but Dad wasn't. Yes, he was, I snapped. And for the first time, emotion broke through the ice layer of my voice. He chose it. He preferred to fake his death, make us go through this, rather than face what he had done. Everything has been a lie. Lucas looked at the papers, then looked at me, and I saw how his world was also shattering. The image of his father, his hero, the man he had cried for and admired, was crumbling before his eyes. His fury toward me vanished, replaced by a deeper, more essential horror. My God, he whispered, and tears finally sprouted from his eyes, furrowing his cheeks. Why did he do this to us? I don't know, I replied, and I took out the key, showing it to him in the palm of my hand. But this key could lead us to the answer, or to him. Lucas looked at the tiny key, as if it were a poisonous snake. His breathing became choppy. What is that? I don't know, but it's his. I put the key away again. The wedding was canceled. Good. Your fiancée asked you to disappear. I have, but not to do her a favor, Lucas. I've done it to bury the woman I was, the one who lived on false memories. I approached him, who seemed to have shrunk, turned back into the scared child who made the notch in the door. I put a hand on his shoulder. He was tense as a rock. Now you have a choice, I said, looking him straight in the eyes, which were Manuel's eyes, but now I only saw deception in them. You can stay here, with the pieces of the life you thought you had, or you can come with me. You can help me discover what the hell your father really did, and why we deserved this. I let go of him. I turned around and started walking down the sidewalk, leaving the house for the last time. I didn't look back. I didn't know if he was following me or staying petrified in the garden of the empty house, holding the shreds of his past in his hands. I only knew that I could no longer look back. My past had died, and I had to find out what monster had lived in it. The worn tile path meandered between tall, silent cypress trees, like dark fingers pointing at a leaden sky that promised rain. Key number 217, weighed in my pocket like a slab. Each step resonated not only on the cemetery's lonely path, but in the deepest chambers of my destroyed soul. Lucas walked beside me, in thick, heavy silence. His breathing was choppy, and every so often, he cast furtive glances toward me, as if he were still looking for the mother he thought he knew in my face, not this stranger, with an iron gaze and a heart of ash. We had deciphered the label. It wasn't a locker or an apartment. Number 217 corresponded to a family mausoleum in the old municipal cemetery, the Hidalgos. The irony was so bitter, I could taste it in the back of my tongue, mixed with fear and a rage that never stopped burning. "Are you sure?" Lucas murmured, for the umpteenth time, his voice broken by emotion. "This is macabre. Everything that has surrounded your father in the last 20 years has been," I replied, and my voice sounded cold, strange even to my own ears. "Lies make everything macabre, son." We reached the oldest section of the cemetery. Statues of decapitated angels watched our passage with blind eyes of moss. The wind whispered among the tombstones, carrying away the last sighs of those who lay there. And then, there it was, the Hidalgo Mausoleum, a small construction of white marble already yellowed by time and pollution. On the wrought iron door, a plaque with the names, and just below, a discreet lock, almost hidden among the ornaments. The number 217 was engraved on a small bronze medallion, so small it almost went unnoticed. Lucas stopped, turning pale. He brought a hand to his mouth. "My God," he gasped. What's inside?" "The truth," I said simply. My hand didn't tremble when I took out the key. The cold metal, coupled with the lock, with a soft, ominous click. I turned. The mechanism gave way with a muffled creak that seemed to break the very silence of death. I pushed the heavy iron door. It creaked on its hinges, protesting, as if it didn't want to reveal the secret it kept. The darkness inside was absolute. It smelled of damp earth, of stopped time, of oblivion. Lucas turned on his phone's flashlight, his hand trembling so much that the beam of light danced grotesquely on the interior walls. There were no coffins. There were no remains. It was just a small empty chamber, with a stone bench and a box. It wasn't the metal box I had found. This one was bigger, made of noble wood, with steel reinforcements, like an old sailor's chest. On it rested a white envelope, immaculate, with a single name written on the cover, in that handwriting that now gave me chills. For Lucas. Lucas let out a choked scream. The phone almost fell from his hands. "No," he murmured, stepping back. "I can't. You have to," I said, and for the first time my voice softened, imbued with infinite sorrow. "It's for you." With clumsy movements, like an automaton, he approached and took the envelope. He opened it with fingers that didn't seem his. He took out several handwritten pages. The flashlight illuminated the paper, and I saw how his eyes frantically scanned the lines. His breathing became increasingly agitated, and a sob, dry and heartbreaking, burst from his chest. Tears fell on the paper, blurring the ink. What does it say?" I asked, my own heart beating so hard I felt it would break my ribs. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head, over and over, as if fighting against a tide of incomprehensible anguish. Finally, he raised his gaze to me. His eyes were flooded with pain so pure, so raw, that it hurt to look at him. He didn't do it. He managed to articulate between sobs. It wasn't him. "What?" The world stopped. The air thickened until it became unbreathable. It was the majority partner, Mr. Montenegro. Dad discovered the embezzlement, the real scam. Too late. Montenegro had it all planned. He set a trap for him. He told him that if he spoke, if he went to the police, he would hurt us. Us. You, Sophia, me. Lucas gasped, looking for air. Dad didn't flee. His voice broke. He pointed with a trembling finger at the wooden chest. He surrendered to Montenegro to protect us. So Montenegro would believe that the money had disappeared with him. This box, this is what Montenegro wanted. The loot that Dad never took. The truth hit me with the force of a tsunami. Manuel, my Manuel, he hadn't been a coward. He had been a hero, a silent hero, who had carried the guilt, the opprobrium, who had preferred that we believe him a scammer, rather than put us in danger. He had chosen the lie to save us. He had died, not from a fictitious disease, but to protect his fiction. Montenegro had eliminated him, and had made it seem like a natural death. Everything fit, everything. A heartbreaking scream escaped from the deepest part of my being. I collapsed to my knees on the cold floor of the crypt, my hands clenched over my mouth to muffle the sobs that shook me with uncontrollable violence. 20 years. 20 years of wrong pain. 20 years of rage directed at the wrong man. I had judged him. I had hated him in the last days. And he had given his life for us. I'm sorry, I screamed, and my voice bounced off the stone walls, a desperate lament directed at a man who couldn't hear me. Manuel, I'm so sorry. Lucas knelt beside me and wrapped me in his arms. He was no longer the child. He was the man, strong, holding his broken mother. We cried together. We cried for the late truth, for the invisible heroism, for the years lost in the shadow of a necessary lie. We cried for him. He loved you, Mom, Lucas whispered against my hair, his voice loaded with an emotion that transfigured him. In the letter, he says that the only thing that tore his soul apart was not being able to tell you that you are the best thing that happened to him in life, that dying for you and for us was the greatest honor of his existence. His words destroyed and rebuilt me at the same time. The pain was sharp, piercing, but now it was mixed with a love so immense, so pure, that it transcended death, time, and betrayal. Manuel hadn't failed me. Never. He had been the man I always believed he was, and more. Suddenly, a voice, cold and cutting as broken glass, made us separate with a start. Well, what a touching family reunion, just in time for the burial. At the entrance of the mausoleum, silhouetted against the grayish light of the afternoon, was Valeria's figure. But it wasn't the impeccable and controlled Valeria I knew. Her expensive suit was disheveled, her perfect hair messed by the wind, and in her eyes, those eyes that had always seemed cold to me, now burned a light of absolute rage and desperation. And in her hand, held with terrifying familiarity, gleamed the dark metal of a small pistol. Lucas jumped to his feet, instinctively placing himself between her and me. Valeria? What the hell are you doing here? What is that? He shouted, his voice trembling, but full of a protective ferocity I didn't know he had. She smiled, a twisted and horrible grimace that didn't reach her eyes. What am I doing? Claiming what's mine, darling. What should have always been mine, she said, and her gaze fixed on the wooden chest. My grandfather Montenegro spent years looking for this. He died believing that your stupid and noble father had taken it to the grave. But I always knew there had to be proof, a key, something. And when your mother started acting so strangely, selling everything, I knew she had found something. I followed her, and boy was I right. Everything clicked then. Her hatred toward me, her contempt for my emotional weight, for my connection to the past. It wasn't just snobbery or cruelty. It was fear. Fear that the truth would come to light. Fear that it would be discovered that her fortune, her position, everything she had, was built on her grandfather's dirty money and on my husband's blood. Your grandfather murdered my father, Lucas said, with a voice that was a low roar, full of hate. My grandfather was a visionary, she shrieked, the pistol trembling slightly in her hand. Your father was a weak sentimentalist. He got in his way. And now, you get in mine. Get away from the chest. No, I said. I got up, with effort, leaning on the cold wall. I dried my tears with the back of my hand. I no longer felt fear, only a terrible calm, an absolute determination. My gaze fixed on hers. You won't take anything. It's the price of my husband's blood. It's the proof of his honor. Valeria's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. Shut up, crazy old woman. You and your fucking honor. People die of hunger for honor. I won't. She advanced a step, pointing directly at my chest with the pistol. Lucas, move your mother away or you'll regret it. Lucas didn't move. He stood firm, with clenched fists. Lower the gun, Valeria. This is over. No, this is just beginning, she screamed, and her finger tightened around the trigger. The shot was deafening in the closed space of the crypt. A bird perched on a cypress outside took flight, alarmed. But the bullet didn't reach me. Lucas had thrown himself in front of me at the last microsecond. The impact made him spin around, and he fell heavily to the ground, at my feet, with a muffled moan. A scarlet stain began to spread rapidly over his white shirt, just below his shoulder. Lucas! The scream tore my throat. I threw myself over him, touching his face, his chest, my hands immediately staining with his warm blood. No, my son. God, no. He half opened his eyes. With difficulty, he tried to speak, but only a trickle of blood came from his lips. Valeria seemed paralyzed for an instant, horrified by what she had done. The pistol trembled violently in her hand. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. I didn't want, she stammered. But then her gaze hardened again when she saw the chest. This doesn't take anything away from me. She lunged toward the chest, but at that precise moment, blue intermittent lights illuminated the entrance of the mausoleum. Sirens, distant at first, but approaching rapidly. Sophia. She must have called the police when Lucas and I had left the house, alarmed by our state and by the terrible revelations. Valeria screamed with rage and frustration. She looked at the chest, then the entrance, then at us. With a final oath, she fled from the crypt, slipping among the tombs, like the cowardly shadow she had always been. I barely noticed. My whole world was reduced to my son, bleeding in my arms. Hold on, Lucas. Please, hold on, I begged, pressing on the wound with my hands, trying to stanch the blood that escaped between my fingers. Help is coming, please. He looked at me. His eyes, so similar to his father's, no longer had fear. They had peace, and a love so immense that it broke my soul. He would be proud of you, Mom, he whispered with a threat of voice. I'm. And then, his eyes closed. No, I howled, shaking him gently. Lucas, no, open your eyes, please. The footsteps of the police officers echoed on the gravel path. Voices, flashlights that blinded us. They separated me from him gently but firmly. I saw how they put compresses on him, how they talked to him, how they loaded him onto a stretcher. I went after them, staggering, covered in his blood, my world reduced to the image of his motionless body. In the ambulance, gripping his cold hand, praying to a God I had blamed for 20 years, I knew that the truth, for the first time, hadn't freed me. It had condemned me to a new and more terrible loss. But then, in the rattling of the ambulance, under the dim light of the cabin, I felt how his fingers moved weakly between mine, how a pressure, almost imperceptible, returned the squeeze. And I knew, in the deepest part of my being, that my family's story, written in lies, pain, and a love stronger than death, hadn't ended. It had just been reborn from its ashes, and this time, it would be a story of truth, of honor, and of a redemption that had cost tears of blood, but that finally, at last, belonged to us.